Man, this Twitter exchange was absolutely brutal, and it highlights a lot about the culture that we live in. Like, here you have a lady that's asking, why do men feel the need to go through things alone? And she's getting like 2.6 million responses. Like, this is a very viral thing. A lot of men are explaining. And, like, props to her. Like, she didn't go to academia. She didn't pick up a feminist book that's written by a hag with daddy issues. She's actually, like, asking. She's trying to find out why men go through things alone. And she's getting an answer from this gentleman. And he says, my first girlfriend got the ick when I cried after learning my childhood best friend had terminal cancer at the age of 21. So basically, a woman saw him crying and she got put off by it. Many such cases. I've seen it on Reddit a lot. A lot of men are basically saying that, yeah, I was crying and my girlfriend was getting the ick. Or you even have like cases where women post on the subreddit Am I the Asshole? And they're basically saying, yeah, my boyfriend shared this with me and he started crying and I got the ick. And I just can't feel attraction to him anymore. And to be honest, I don't know if I should blame them, because attraction is something that you just feel emotionally. Like, it's not something you have control over. And some of these ladies were genuinely upset that this is how they're feeling, and they would wish that they don't feel like that, because it's almost like they're a bad person for doing it. But, like, again, they can't have control over this, right? And obviously not all women, but, like, the one that I saw on Reddit definitely did. So the situation that he is explaining is quite possible. But here you have a blue check mark saying, I doubt that it was, but okay. And this is where the irony is completely lost on this lady. Like, she just doesn't see why she's part of the problem. Because if we recap, you have a woman asking the question, why do men feel the need to go through things alone? You have a guy that's sharing something very personal and emotional to him. And you have a woman that immediately proceeds to downplay his experience. Now imagine that you go through life and this happens more than once. Like, every single time you share your experience, you have, like, other people that are downplaying it and think less of you. How likely is it that you will keep sharing experiences? I mean, this is a cultural thing that happens to men a lot. And again, if you go on various subreddits, you will see that trans people that are women and transition into men, they have their eyes open to this, right? Especially if they're passing and no one knows that they used to be a woman, and people identify them as a man, and they treat them as a man, and they go into such depression. And they go on the Reddit subforum and they talk about their experiences, and they say, well, ever since I was a man, I'm invisible. Like, no one cares about me. No one cares about my feelings. No one cares about my emotions. And there's even like a famous feminist that wrote a book and made a documentary where she wasn't transgender, but she actually put on makeup and pretended to be a man. And she had to stop after a while during the experiment because she was getting suicidal thoughts. It's like, it was so difficult and it was such a strange new experience that she wasn't able to cope with it. And I don't know who else to trust better than women who experienced what it's like to be a woman and then tried to be a man, and people actually identified them as such, and they noticed a huge change, a huge negative change, if you will, because when they were women and they were having any type of issues, any type of complaints, immediately people believed them, immediately people surrounded them and offered them compassion. But when they were men, no one cared. In fact, people thought less of them for sharing. And if you want examples, I mean, you can look at what happened when Jordan Peterson cried in an interview, and how feminists and other people that were encouraging men to cry behaved towards him, or when Judge Kavanaugh was crying and how people behaved towards him on the internet, or how when Kyle Rittenhouse was crying, and so on and so forth. And women know this. Like, women are aware about this. They pretend not to. But if you remember the Johnny Depp recordings, when Amber Heard was beating Johnny, and she was like, well, who's going to believe you, Johnny? No one's going to believe you. Like, they know about this, right? But they try to pretend and they try to gaslight that this is not something that's taking place. And for men, like most of us find it normal. Like we're not complaining about it. But if you ask a question, we're willing to share. But I don't feel the need to change society or to make it different than it already is. I'm quite happy, like a lot of hardiness makes for stronger people. Like I'm stronger emotionally because of it, and many other men feel the same way. But the reality is that you get used to it. And I would also assume that because we're eased into it, it's a lot less difficult for men. Because, like, when you're a kid, your parents love you and they actually care about the things. And when you're crying, people give you attention. But then as you're starting to grow up, you notice that people become more indifferent. And even your mother tells you to stop crying. And you notice that, all right, well, crying doesn't solve things. So you need to find different solutions. While if you're a woman and your entire life you've been coddled and people care about you. And then every single time you're crying, you create a crowd of people that are sharing compassion and empathy. If you're just trying to experience how life is like to be a man, and you're not eased into it, like one day you're a woman, the next you're a man, like, yeah, I mean, that's a huge culture shock. So I don't blame, all the ladies that go on Reddit or that make various experiments and then write books about it and how they're saying that it's absolutely shocking and it's a decision that they regretted making. But all in all, again, it just makes you to be a hardier person. It just makes you to be more self-reliant. And the reality is that men do actually share their feelings with other people. It's just that they rarely do so with women because they try doing this once, twice. It bites them in the ass. Like one of the worst things that you can do to a man if you're a woman, and I strongly suggest you don't do this, is when a man shares something to you. Right? So, like, let's say you have a conversation and the man has a moment of vulnerability and he goes, it's like, well, I'm really afraid about the relationship with my son. It's kind of strenuous. Like, I'm doing my best to be a good dad, but I did some mistakes and blah, blah, blah. Like, the man actually opens up. And usually, like, the woman listens, but, like, a couple of days later, let's say that the woman is angry at the same man. Maybe he slighted her in some way, or maybe she's just upset. And as she's arguing, she will be like, you will never be a good father. You are a failure. You're a deadbeat dad. Because, like, she knows that's what's upsetting him. And now she's using that in a moment of anger. And the question is, do you think you're the first lady that thought about doing something like this? Or do you think that after you do this, that person is still going to trust you? And how many people can do this to a person in their life until they realize, okay, maybe I shouldn't share? Or they just happen to have like a very small group of people that they share these things with. And that's that. But usually, yeah, like for men, we don't really like to share. What we like to do when we're feeling down is to play a video game and say some slurs and trash talk and say some banter. But unfortunately, society is taking that away from us with moderation, with safety, in order to make sure that even that outlet doesn't exist. So yeah, no, like most men won't complain about it, they won't talk about it, they just cope. And I hope this actually answers the question. It's like, why do men not feel the need to go through things alone? Let me know what you guys think though, and as usual, I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.